Good morning. I'm Gregory Mason, and welcome to First Presbyterian Church for Olympia Brown Unitarian Universalist Church's service. We'll start with some announcements. Today is the deadline for paper raise right orders. See me if you need a form. If you are part of the Good Shepherd Committee and did not get an email from Shirley Reynolds in the past week, please let her know. She had to reconstruct her whole list of over 70 people, and a few are missing, so she'd like to get you back on the group list as soon as possible. Jan Fredrickson and Suzanne Landis will be working on putting together hospitality groups to provide treats for coffee hour. In the meantime, please see Jan or Suzanne to sign up to bring treats for the next few weeks until the groups can be put together and a schedule can be made. Just a note, the office will be closed this coming Friday, March 29th. I'd like to thank our volunteers today. Joe Pooroy, who's filling in for me, who's filling in for Brian until I get back up there. Our ushers, Nancy Hennessy and Joe Cushing. Our Zoom host, Maria Scott. And our coffee hour host, 8th Principal Committee and Patty Riemann. And speaking of Joe Cushing, it's his birthday today. Is he up here? Is he downstairs? Oh, shucks. We were going to sing happy birthday. Well, I already did, so. For more information and details about all these announcements, along with others and community announcements, see your weekly emails. Please join us for coffee hour in Erman Hall following the service. For those joining us on YouTube, log into Zoom for your coffee hour, and the link is in today's email.
Wow. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to Olympia Brown Unitarian Universalist Church, currently meeting at First Presbyterian Church. I'm Patty Riemann, this morning's worship assistant. My pronouns are she, her, hers. All are welcome here. Our mission as a church is to be a community of hope, challenging us to transform ourselves, promote love and justice, respect all faiths, and shepherd our planet. As we gather, may we make space for all that we bring, all that is on our hearts, each time we come together. This is one of the promises of our faith tradition, that all of who we are is welcome in our co-created and shared sacred space. Welcome to those joining us on YouTube. Welcome to those joining us here in the sanctuary. I'm grateful for this space that can hold us all. It is good to be together. Our special guest this morning is Steve Seek. And let's go.
Good morning. It is so good to be with you. My name is Steve. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a seminarian at Meadville Lombard, and an intern minister at First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee, and it is beautiful to be with you today. A chalice lighting. We light this chalice, a spark of hope in times of despair, a touch of warmth in coldness, a flame of love in clouds of cruelty. May our chalice shine in peace and unrest. Please now rise in body or spirit as we sing the first 4 verses of hymn 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People.
And now it's time for the message for all ages. So if all the children and those young at heart can come on forward. So this morning, I'm going to read the story, Wangari's Trees of Peace, a true story from Africa by Jeanette Winter. Wangari lives under an umbrella of green trees in the shadow of Mount Kenya in Africa. She watches the birds in the forest where she and her mother go to gather firewood for cooking. And she helps harvest the sweet potatoes, sugarcane, and maize from the rich soil. Do you know what maize is? Corn. Maize is corn. Wangari shines in school, and when she grows tall like the trees in the forest, she wins a scholarship to study in America. So that must be her going to America. Looks to me like she went to New York. It's a big city. You can see the Statue of Liberty? Yeah, the Statue of Liberty is right there. Yeah, New York is just America. 6 years later, her studies over, Wangari returns to her Kenya home and sees a change. What has happened? She wonders. Where are the trees? Wangari sees women bent from hauling firewood miles and miles from home. She sees barren land where no crops grow. And where are the birds? Thousands of trees have been cut down to make room for buildings, but no one planted new trees to take their place. Will all of Kenya become a desert, she wonders as her tears fall? Wangari thinks about the barren land. I can begin to replace some of the lost trees here in my own backyard, one tree at a time. She starts by planting 9 seedlings. Watching the seedlings take root gives Mungari the idea to plant more, to start a farm for baby trees, a nursery. In an open space, she plants row after row of the tiny trees. Next, Wangari convinces the village women that planting trees is a good thing. She gives each one a seedling. Our lives will be better when we have trees again. You'll see, we are planting the seeds of hope. The women spread all over the village, planting tiny trees in long rows, like a green belt stretching over the land. The government men laugh. Women can't do this, they say. It takes trained foresters to plant trees. The women ignore the laughter and keep on planting. Wangari pays them a small amount for each seedling still living after 3 months, their first earnings ever. Word travels. The wind rustling through leaves about the green returning to Wangari's village. Soon, other women in other villages and towns and cities in Kenya are planting long rows of seedlings too. But the cutting continues. Wangari stands tall as an oak to protect the old trees still remaining. We need a park more than we need an office tower. The government men disagree. They call her a troublemaker and put her in jail. And still she stands tall. Right is right, even if you're alone. But Wangari is not alone. Talk of the trees spread all over Africa like ripples in Lake Victoria. More women hear the talk and plant even more seedlings in longer and longer rows. The seedlings take root and grow tall until there are 30 million trees where there were none. The umbrella of Kenya returns. Women walk tall, their backs straight, so now they can gather firewood closer to home. The land is no longer barren. Sweet potatoes, sugarcane, and maize grow again in the rich red earth. The whole world hears of Wangari's trees and of her army of women who planted them. And if you were to climb to the very top of Mount Kenya today, you would see the millions of trees growing below you and the green Wangari brought back to Africa. So this is a true story. Happened in 1870. It started in 1877 when Wangari started to putting the trees back in Africa, and they're still here today. They're still in Africa today. So she did some amazing work. Okay, now it's time for the blessing.
There are many ways we give to the life of this church, and the monetary offering is just one of these ways. Each month, we partner with a local organization and share the money gathered during our collection. The organization for March is Racine Montessori School, RMS. Racine Montessori School is designed to nurture each child's whole development and instill a lifelong love of learning. The Montessori educational method helps children develop independence, confidence, moral responsibility, social purpose, and inner peace through teacher guidance on self-directed work. RMS was founded 60 years ago, and our own Jean Arnold was instrumental. Her family was one of the school's first families, and many OBUUC children have attended RMS. RMS offers reduced tuition, and currently 55% of the students receive financial aid. Donations will be used to sustain the RMS Scholarship Fund. Thank you for all the ways you are giving to our congregation. This is the time in our service when we invite you to come up and light a candle to represent a joy or sorrow you are holding in your heart today. All are invited to come forward to light a candle. For all those unspoken joys and sorrows and those of our family on YouTube, may we hold one another in our hearts. Please join in singing our response, "There is a Love." Our first reading this morning comes from our own Reverend Olympia Brown. Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves. Our second reading is the poem We Are Not Done by Odette Fulbright Folsom, which was written in memoriam for Eric Garner. Do not think we are finished. Oh no, we will never be finished, never just done, until the light of justice is lit behind every eye. Do not think we will be silent. No, there will not be silence until the world has sung the names of the dead with full throats, and still we will sing on. Do not think fear is the end of us. Oh, you are broken in mind and heart if you even imagine that our fear for our lives is the end of this story. We are braver than you have ever conceived, and you will not be the end of us. We have come to take back the world that is the inheritance of better children, better lovers, better days. There will be love again, but justice is our demand now. You will not take us down. We are endless, fire-lit, determined, and we are coming for you. And the last reading draws an excerpt from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. There end the readings.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you to Leanne and Alejandro. What an honor. What an honor it is to be at the Olympia Brown UU community. Thank you for this. As a seminarian, I study exemplars of our ministry, like the Reverend Olympia Brown, a fierce and tireless advocate for women's suffrage, an abolitionist, and, as you probably know, the first woman to be ordained in a denomination that recognized that ordination. I personally have a hard time with tenacity, right? She must have been so tenacious. And for me, I lack the tenacity to clean my bathroom every week. And so I ask myself, how could she have had such tenacity to get ordained and to preach and advocate with such a prophetic voice? We know that Reverend Olympia Brown faced constant rejection, dismissal, and misogyny at every turn. What could have kept her on her path to becoming Reverend Olympia Brown? Well, among other things, she was a Universalist Christian. She had faith that, and these are her words, when God is served, earth becomes a heaven. Like many religious liberals in her time, she didn't view Jesus as God, but she did seek to reclaim Jesus' message from what she called the adulterated Christianity that had arisen in her life. And I bring this up because sometimes we don't know how to talk about Jesus in UU circles, right? In this room, we have people almost surely who identify as agnostic or atheist or humanist, just as we have people who identify as Buddhist or pagan or Jewish or religious naturalists, just as we have people who identify as Christian in this room. This room is enormous spiritually, right? And when we think about how Jesus' message has affected us, we have people whose most powerful spiritual experiences came from Christianity just as we have people who've never been Christian, just as we have people who have been harmed by Christianity. Yeah? And so we hold with some tenderness how Jesus' teachings have affected different people differently. And at the same time, we acknowledge that most of our UU ethics, or at least a lot of them, our commitment to social justice, our care for the oppressed and the marginalized, the things that make us a spiritual community, much of what we do, much of what was part of Olympia Brown's tenacity comes from Jesus' teachings. And there's a risk in having an ambiguous relationship with your own spiritual foundations, yeah? So let's turn it around a little bit. Jesus loved to ask that question, who do you say that I am? Right? He asks it a lot in the Gospels. So I ask you to think about that for a second. How would you describe Jesus if someone from another planet arrived and walked into this building and said, what's all this about? How would you describe Jesus? So take a moment to ponder that. It's been my experience throughout UU communities that we tend to identify Jesus as one of these three things: a teacher of peace, a teacher of peace, a prophet of radical inclusive love, or a social activist who sought to upend empire, right? A teacher of peace, a radically inclusive prophet, or a social activist. Did that align closely with where you were? I'm thinking about all this today. This is the first and maybe last time I preach about Jesus, but I'm thinking about it because today's Palm Sunday. And this is a day when about 2 billion Christians around the world are celebrating Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem, right? At this moment, as Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, the Israelites believed that he would be the defeater of the Roman Empire, the deliverer of a new age of prosperity. Now we know how the story goes. 5 days later, he's executed by the state. And so Palm Sunday holds this contradiction. It's a contradiction between thinking Jesus is X and discovering that he's Y. Thinking that he's going to be liberator and conqueror and discovering that he's agitator and martyr. There's a difference between what folks wanted and what he was. And I think that might be true for us as well. What do we want Jesus to be when we claim him in our interfaith efforts? And which parts of him do we claim and which parts do we ignore? And it's for that reason that I want to bring up a passage that came up in my New Testament class last year, and I couldn't resist finding a way to preach about it. It comes from the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 10. And I promise you, this is what it says. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. Now, I grew up in a Christian church, and I don't remember that passage. I think we must have skipped that every Sunday for the first 18 years of my life. And you may feel the same way, right? If you grew up in a Christian denomination, did we skip that part? And if you didn't grow up Christian, you go, this is why I'm not a Christian, right? For the UUs that want to frame Jesus as this lover of peace, this radically inclusive dude, this passage doesn't make any sense. And I regret to inform you that there are many passages like this, where we want Jesus to be this inclusive dude, and he's saying, this is wheat, this is chaff, this is sheep, this is goat, right? If you sit down and read the 4 Gospels today, you'll be surprised at how often those come up. We might be left wondering, are we drawing from a hateful source in our spiritual tradition? How could this person have inspired Olympia Brown to be such a fierce advocate for women's suffrage? Could this be the same guy that inspired Reverend Dr. King to do his incredible work? Or is there something about this kind of passage that helps us to better understand their prophetic work? So let's go at it from that direction. What is your relationship with conflict? What's your relationship with conflict? Did you ever have to do a conflict inventory test at work? No, is it just me? Okay. Has your conflict style come up in therapy? I love it when that happens, right? Many of us in the Midwest are socialized to believe that conflict is a kind of failing, that if there's conflict, somehow you're messing it up. Raised voices, explicit disagreements, these are, for some of us at least, signs that we've lost our cool, that we've lost our ability to think rationally. In one sense, I think that's a good thing. I'm a dad, and I'm raising my children, hopefully, to be emotionally regulated. I don't want to live in a world where every conflict is handled with screaming and tantrums. No thanks. I got enough of them already. And in another sense, I think we can confuse emotional dysregulation with healthy disagreement and merge them together. And when we do that, when we mix up the ability to disagree with having a tantrum, we learn some things. We learn some things like how to go along to get along. We learn how to suck it up, how to keep a stiff upper lip. We learn things like, hey, look, it could be worse. We learn you should be grateful for what you have. What we don't learn then is how to say, I don't like this. We don't learn to say, that's not fair. And so, for some of us, many of us, after some reflection, we realize that while we've learned to keep the emotional thermostat low, and that's a good thing, we've also come to realize that we don't have a lot of tools for healthy conflict. And that brings us to that line about dividing families. I think with a little bit of context, we might see that Jesus is teaching us something about good conflict in that passage. Anytime you pull one of those gospel passages out of context, you should have a little question over your head going, what happened right before that? So let me back up. That was chapter 10. Let me go into chapter 9. Chapter 9 is what scholars call a collection of miracle stories, right, where all of the miracles get sort of merged into one giant story. In chapter 9, Jesus heals a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. He resurrects a dead girl. He heals 2 blind men. He heals a mute man. And then as the folks keep lining up to be healed, he turns to his disciples and says, there's more work to be done here than I can do. And he gives them the power to heal. And he goes out and says, no, you go out and heal everybody. But this is where chapter 10 begins, is where he's commissioning his disciples to heal folks. And he says, by the way, they're going to hate you. They're going to hate you for your healing work because you're part of me and my movement, and nobody likes my movement, right? So he warns his disciples, keep a low profile, move quickly, because you're under a watch now. The gospel author is foreshadowing that Jesus' message disrupts the social order. And if you've lived on earth more than 5 years, you pretty quickly catch on that folks who disrupt the social order are not well received. Yeah, nobody likes that person. The point is not that Jesus is sending his disciples out to get hurt. He's sending them out to heal people. Remember that they have just watched him resurrect a child. Can you imagine what it must have felt like to be one of those disciples, right? That bone-deep awareness that what you're doing is right and good. I haven't seen a miracle like that, so no, I can't. I haven't seen anyone resurrect a child lately. Here's what I did see. I did see a global virus come out of nowhere with a shockingly high mortality rate and a very quick dispersal, And then I saw a vaccine emerge really quickly that could make the morbidity rate dramatically decline. If you had that vaccine, would you not go knocking door to door saying, "Look, I found this thing that will save you"? We saw how that went. Yeah, we saw how that went. You don't have to use your powers of imagination to envision the fights that it sparks, sometimes within families, father and son, mother and daughter. You might have even experienced it. Would it have been better to not offer that vaccine in the first place so that you could avoid the conflicts and keep a negative peace, which is the absence of tension? Or would it be better to knock on every door and say, "I have a vaccine that could save you," even if you knew in advance that it would disrupt the peace? As Unitarian Universalists, we make this weekly commitment, this daily commitment, to working in our world to make it more just, more equitable and loving and fair and interdependent. That's why we gather. And that's not always received great. You don't always get thanked for that. Sometimes you're told that you are too woke. You're told that you're making things complicated. You're told that you're stirring up stuff that doesn't need to get stirred up. Last summer, I was working out at the YMCA, and there's two guys like 3 feet away from me on this side that are loudly and joyously mocking trans and non-binary identities. And then when that wasn't enough, then they picked it up into mocking reparations for African Americans. Now, on this side of me, on the machine over here, is a black man and a non-binary person as they're working out. And I can see them warming up for a third topic yet to be determined. And the Midwestern conflict avoidant in me is going, negative peace, absence of tension, negative peace, absence of tension. But I was in seminary, so there was no going back. So I took a deep breath, and I thought, if I say this well, they'll thank me for it. So I gather myself, and I take a deep breath, and I say, "Excuse me, gentlemen. I'm wondering if this is a conversation that you can have on your own time, and maybe while we're in the gym, we'll all just work out." Because also, I was judging them. They weren't working out. They were just talking. Do you think they thanked me for that? No? Okay, 0 hands on that. No, in fact, they told me to shut up. "We weren't talking to you," was, I believe, the first line. So then I thought I was witty in saying, "I know, but when you talk that loud, I don't have a choice but to be a part of your conversation." To which they said, "Maybe you should shut up and mind your own business." I came back with, I am trying to mind my own business. I'm just trying to work out. But when you are shouting about all these people that you hate, it's now everybody's business. I think it ended with, "You should get the hell out of here," and then me going, "All right, well, I said what I needed to say." Have you had an experience like this? It's like genuinely, I'm still shaking, and this was like 18 months ago, right? It's a little mini terror. I keep thinking in my heart of hearts that if I come up with a better way to say it, they'll go, "You're right. I should just be working out. I should be strong like you," right? The presence of justice doesn't always mean an absence of tension. Prophetic work, and I'm not saying that I was a prophet in the YMCA. I was doing the bare minimum of being a human being. But the prophetic work that Olympia Brown did, that kind of prophetic work, is never popular. No one ever thanks you for calling them out. I mean, let's come back to Reverend Brown for a moment. She had no support for her ministry education. All the schools that she applied to, including the place I'm currently going, said, "No, women don't get ordained. You should volunteer in RE," right? That was the universal response. And then she found, when she applied to St. Lawrence University, that the president wrote back, "I don't think you should come here." And she said, "That's not no." I don't think you should come here is different than no. So she came anyways and dared him to expel her, which he didn't. And then when she went to get ordained, they said no, and she shopped around until she found the district in the Universalist Church that would ordain her. I try to imagine what that must have been like to be not just the only woman in your seminary, but the only woman ever in seminary. Can you imagine how marginalized she was every day in class, every Sunday that she was at a pulpit? Because it wasn't just that she was the only one that folks knew. She was the only one that anyone had ever known. When you're on the margins, being well-liked and keeping the tension low, that's just never in the cards. That's never an option. And I bring that up also to mention that Jesus was an illegitimate son of a day laborer in the backwoods region of a colonized land that the Romans barely cared about. He was a nobody to the Israelites, who were a nobody to the Romans. And it seems to me that if you're never going to fit in, maybe the only thing you have left is to tell the truth. It's possible, to come back to Jesus' quote here, that maybe being helpful is different than being comfortable. Maybe being helpful is different than being comfortable. We go back to Dr. King's letter, preferring a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. Or to Odette Fulbright-Folson's poem that says, "There will be love again, but justice is our demand now." Being comfortable can be a barrier to being helpful. Being comfortable can be a barrier to being an ally in the work of creating beloved community. Being comfortable takes away the urgency for those who are uncomfortable every day and every night. The spiritual foundation of justice work is seeing that someone else is crushed, experiencing empathy, and then showing up the way they ask you to show up. And that is a tough ask when you've just made a fresh cup of tea and you've got a new Netflix show to watch. Can't I just post my allyship on Facebook? So, yes, I think we do bristle when Jesus says, "Do not think I have come to bring peace. I have not come to bring peace." But I'm also here today to tell you that I think that we support what he's saying more broadly. Maybe you've made voter registration calls and gotten an earful from some of the folks that answer. Maybe you've gone to a school board meeting and stood up for some just and compassionate policy and were shouted down. Maybe you put a sign on your lawn affirming your values and it was torn down or defaced. The life-saving, spirit-saving message that we embrace in those situations has, well, sometimes divided us, one from another, neighbor from neighbor, sometimes father from son. I hope that we always hold a receptive ear to the possibility we might be wrong. And I hope that we hold out a kind of infinite hope for the capacity of everyone, including those guys at the Y, the capacity for everyone to become compassionate and peaceful. But we're going to end up showing up for radical love every day, no matter what, not counting the cost. The radical love that you embrace is a kind of spiritual vaccine, if you will. It will heal our world. And I hope that we're unapologetic in promoting our radical love everywhere, even though, and maybe because, it disturbs the negative peace. Reverend Olympia Brown said, "Stand by this faith. Work for it and sacrifice for it. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great, true principle without counting the cost. Plant the trees anyways, because you are part of a life-saving, soul-saving movement. May it be so. Please rise in body or spirit as we sing 131, Love Will Guide Us. We extinguish our chalice and hold on to the light shared in this community, the light that lives in each of us, reminding us that we are connected and held always in the larger love. So go in compassion for yourself and for others. Go in tenacity for the presence of justice. And go in peace, knowing that we can make this earth a heaven. May it be so.